Feeling overwhelmed with your podcast, but not sure how to take a break from your show without losing listeners? You're not the only one. In this episode, I share exactly how to do that. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs podcast, a place for podcasters to learn what's actually working in the world of podcasting and how to use their podcast to generate consistent leads in their business. I'm your host, Jenny, and I'm so excited you're here.
Hey there, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I am super excited to have you here. Can't wait to jump into today's topic, which is all about how to take breaks from your podcast without losing listeners. And in the past, I've talked about taking breaks in the summer, but this is just more general across the board, not necessarily based on a specific period of time. Before we dive in this episode, I wanted to invite you to learn more about my upcoming group program called the Podcast to Profit Mini Mind that kicks off on Monday, September 2nd. This is a 4-week program, and each week you're going to get access to a new content drop that focuses on helping you grow, scale, and monetize your podcast, among many other incredible benefits. This is for people who already have an established podcast, at least 3 to 6 months of podcasting under your belt. So if that's you and you're ready to take your podcast to the next level, definitely check out the Mini Mind by going to savvypodcastagency.com/minimind. So MINIMIND. And let's get into the episode. So as I'm recording this episode, we are well into the summer months, nearly almost to August, which is just mind-blowing. And you may be a bit worn out from keeping up with all the things in the summer, especially if you've got kids. So I'm really excited to talk about this today to kind of help you take a little bit of a break from your podcast without losing that momentum. So the first thing I want you to do if you're planning to take a break is to let your listeners know that you're going to be taking a break. It's really important to not just ghost your listeners. You really want to let them know in advance that you will be taking a break. You don't need to get in too much details why, but you can share why when that break is happening. So let them know, hey, I'm going to be not podcasting from this date to this date. And you do want to tell them when you plan to be back. You can say I'll be back in 3 months or something, but you don't want to just say, I'm taking a break. I might be back in the future. Because if you don't give them kind of an end date for this break, they will likely lose interest in your show and they'll stop visiting. So when you do give them kind of I'll be back in 3 months kind of thing, this will reduce people from losing interest in the show and unsubscribing because they know that this is a planned break and they know that you'll be back versus I may be back in a couple months. I may not, really depends. You don't want to be wishy-washy with it. So definitely have a set date on when you will be back and let them know in advance. Another thing you can do that isn't a full break, but it can eliminate some work off your plate is to drop down to releasing new episodes every other week instead of weekly. So this means you're only producing 2 new episodes per month. And this is actually something that I did permanently with this podcast earlier this year. And I couldn't be happier about it because putting out a podcast is a lot of work. And as a mom of 2 young kids, it is hard to stay consistent. And this is not my only podcast. I have another podcast that I do put out weekly episodes. So I didn't want to be doing weekly episodes for 2 podcasts. That is way too much. So as long as you're really just consistent with your release schedule, so say you drop down to every other week, you can totally put out 2 episodes a month instead of weekly episodes and still reap the many benefits of podcasting. You don't have to have a weekly show to be successful, which is really, really important to know. So, if you drop down to 2 episodes, let your people know in advance and tell them the new schedule so that they're prepared and stick to it. Don't just say you're going to be doing every other week and then for several weeks don't show up. It's really important to stick to that schedule. And I know sometimes I don't always practice what I preach, but it's really important to stick with it because, typically you would have 52 episodes a year if you don't take any breaks, but you cut that in half if you're doing every other week. So it's definitely a lot more manageable to keep up with when you have a business. And then lastly, something you can do if you're wanting to podcast for a bit and then take a month or two off and then, start up again is switching to seasons. So, like I said earlier, putting out episodes on a weekly basis isn't the only way to have a successful podcast. I know plenty of podcasters who, do seasons of maybe 10 to 12 episodes and then they take a month or two off and then they come back rejuvenated for the next season. This really allows you to plan your content in advance around your busy seasons so that you're not constantly on that content creation hamster wheel. You can take a breather and then come back to it. It helps plan around launches better because you know what's upcoming. And honestly, it's just a great way to have those built-in breaks without having to figure out, when can I take time off? Even though I do love the weekly episode model, I think seasons are so beneficial as well. So I would love to know, have you ever taken a break from your podcast or have plans to do so in the future? Let me know over on Instagram. Our handle is Savvy Podcasting. So that's SAVVY and then podcasting. I would love to hear from you as always. And I'll see you in the next episode where we're going to be diving deeper into the podcast to profit mini mind, what all that entails, what you'll get if you sign up, and all that good stuff. So I will see you in the next episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast player like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher and leave a review. You can find us at savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com and on Facebook at Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs and Instagram at Savvy Podcasting. Make sure to join our free Facebook community for podcasters by going to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com/community and join in on the exclusive community just for Savvy Podcasting for Entrepreneurs listeners. I'll see you there.